Hi, everybody. Welcome to this podcast on ego. Ego is a really interesting thing to look at energetically in the aura. I want to also make it clear that self-love and nurturing yourself, looking after yourself and having boundaries is not ego. Self-love is important, that we take care of ourselves and we look after ourselves, but it lacks ego. And just make sure you understand that, because ego comes from selfishness and personal wanting everything for yourself and putting yourself first, which is different to self-love, which comes from nurturing. When we have a lot of ego, we always think we're right. We don't often listen to other people, and we don't value what other people think or say. In addition to this, we're often very selfish. These are my personal opinions, and this is what I've observed, and you may agree or not agree. However, once you start looking around, and I did some checking, I found that selfishness, people who were really selfish, had very big egos. It was really interesting, and people who weren't very selfish had hardly any ego. Not everyone has a big ego. Some people have massive ones, medium size, and none. It's just working out whether, if you want to ascend spiritually, it's a good idea. Early in my development, I realised I was maybe have a bit of ego there and a bit arrogant. Well, probably came from my gene pool as well. However, I didn't think it was really good for the work, because I just felt that the word I kept getting was I needed to be more humble. I needed to be more humble. So as I progressed spiritually, I tried to actually become more humble with it, and that helped to keep my ego in check and to keep minimizing it. Ego is really bad energetically, I think. I don't think it's a good way to live, because it's always putting yourself above others and having a high opinion of yourself. And I think it's all to do with yourself. And the spiritual work is not to do with yourself. The spiritual work is to do with working with God as you see God, or your guides, or your spiritual helpers. And if you have a lot of ego, you will not give them the same respect or reverence to do the work. We are just the instrument to do the work. When I do these podcasts, it's Wendy talking, but I know that it's them. I'm doing it because they want you to have the information. So I don't take really credit for it. I've thrown a few experiences here and there as a human, but I know this is coming from my promise to do this work, and it comes from a spiritual place. It doesn't come from my ego. When you start to look around and look at the selfish people, you will see they have ego. They have a sort of arrogance in their personality, and will very easily correct or criticise other people, put them down. That's how you'll see it. They're quite intolerant of different beliefs or opinions because their ego is running pretty high. It's not good to be like this, because I don't think it helps you to connect energetically to people very well, because people will sense that bombastic energy and they won't like it, and they'll tend not to attach to you. Of course, if you got two egomaniacs together, they get on pretty well. However, we're talking about energy work, spiritual work, ascending, and it's good to minimize your ego. When I look at people like Mother Teresa and other people who've been down here and done wonderful work, they did not have a big ego. When I went and checked them, because I was curious, they had a small ego, and I found that really, really interesting. Anyone who's doing good work, like really good work for the right reason, not to be the big great woman or guy, look at me, give me an award, not that sort of thing. Actually coming from a good space from their heart, they will have very little ego. The ego is also to do with the mind. It's more of a mental thing. It's how people think. And in some ways, I think people who have a lot of ego are quite disconnected to their heart chakra. They don't do things on feeling. They do what they think is right, and they will be more rigid in their views. Possibly if they went to reading, if you've read anyone who's got a lot of ego, as I have, you will always know, because they start arguing with you or trying to make you second guess what you've got, because they are coming from their ego. They're coming from a mental place. They're not actually connecting with you heart to heart. People who have small egos or no ego also do have big heart chakra, and they're usually very kind, unselfish people. doing things quietly for other people and not needing to get any sort of reward or any kind of accolades. That's how you will also know. They will just quietly do the work. I call it silent work, silent healing, silent sending of good prayers. It's all done silently. You won't even be told that they are doing it for you. Just maybe you find out by accident because of just something they say in the conversation. Try to get rid of your ego if you want to do this work. You can channel better, you can ascend better, your vibration will be higher, and you won't be bowed down, because I think ego is kind of a human characteristic. The soul tends not to have the same ego, perhaps, but the human definitely has ego. So you're coming from a human perspective rather than from a soul perspective. The soul is much more knowing and able to listen to others, more tolerant, more able to see the big picture. The ego, human-driven human, is not. It will be a little bit more like they just see it a certain way and that's the way it is. And there's a kind of inflexibility within it. I suggest that you now look around you, look at yourself first and think if you're carrying a little ego there, maybe you can become more humble. And as you become more humble, your vibration will rise up because you'll be coming from your soul vibration rather than from your human. So that's always going to be higher. Also, you won't be so irritating to other people. If you know people around you who have a lot of ego, it'll actually help you understand. Once I worked out who had a lot of ego, I understood what I was working with, and that made it easier for me to relate to them. I would understand that they would always have to be right. They're often going to be quite controlling. Even if you try and help them, they'll still go and do it their own way. It's just understanding the different dynamic, and maybe they've come in to act like that, learn that way. Perhaps it's their path. But if you're on a spiritual path and you're trying to ascend, that is not a good path for you, the ego path. Having said all these things doesn't mean that you can just get rid of it overnight. I tended to knock it away bit by bit, chip away at it. It was when I thought I was right and, it has to be my way, or, if I was going to be trying to be controlling, that was all that ego behaviour. And I tried more and more to let people do whatever they want, be okay with that. And even with the gift where I can guide people, just give the gift and then you do whatever you want and give them complete free will. Once you start working on this, it's gradual, but you'll notice you'll be different. And there's a kind of calmness when you are more humble, when you don't have ego, you don't have to right the world or correct people when the way they say things, or double check on people all the time or control them. It's kind of liberating, really, because you just be yourself and then they be who they are, and kind of nice. I like it. I prefer that. I've worked on it and try to become more humble. Of course, you're going to be told nice things by people sometimes, and then you just humbly say back, thank you for that, I appreciate it. But you don't sort of put big stars all over yourself and, think that you've won the award of the year. That's not what the game is. It's to help other people use whatever kind of gift you have in every capacity that you can use it to help other people and to make their life better, and in so doing it, I think you make your life better too. We can't change the people who have the ego. If you tell somebody to their face that you have a lot of ego, or that's an ego-driven thing to say, they will probably not like it. So I don't think you should perhaps go that way. It's more, I've done this podcast so you can observe it and just see, and that will help you deal with people better down here. Because ego energy is kind of strong and kind of powerful. I think it comes a lot from the third eye and then from the solar plexus. That's where the energy seems to be pushing out from when I see it. The person who's more humble, has no ego, it's just a lot of heart. It just really is a lot of heart. And that's where they're coming from all the time. And they don't want to overpower you or tell you what to do. They just tell you what they get and then you do what you like with it. It's more of a free will idea to let other people have their free will, whereas ego people aren't really that into free will. Their free will they're into, but they're not so into everyone else's free will, I've noticed, which in itself is very interesting. Work on this if you want to become a more spiritual person. It will help you. And when you're not sure, it's usually how you speak. If it's hierarchical and you're putting someone down and putting yourself above them, then that's when it is. And that could even be the truth. Maybe you are smarter than that person, or maybe you are better at this than that person. But there's no reason to say anything or make it obvious. You just be quiet. And part of the ego person is that they'll be quite vocal and telling you everything and how great thou art, whereas the people without ego tend to be a little shy and humble. When you say how great they are, they tend to sort of go, oh, really, do you think so? Not because they lack confidence, because they probably know they did an okay job, because they maintain in that egoless personality space, which I think is good. Your vibration will go up, I know that for sure, and you'll be vibrating much higher. And also it makes you listen to spirit more, because you don't have your ego in the way. If they tell you something, or if you go to someone who's a good reader, you will listen and you will be guided by it, because you know that they're going to be much better than you are at knowing how this turns out or what you should do, and then you just follow it. I think it's really great. I found this a kind of fascinating thing to find out. I found understanding about the ego really helped me. I had to do a bit of research to find out what it really meant, and then I started to look in my own life and look around at people's energy, and I did find it really interesting. And now I understand that it's much more easy to deal with people who've got a lot of ego, and it's also a great lesson to me not to be like that. So I'm sending you lots of light and lots of love.